Easter had always known what it meant to be invisible. The vast mansion of Disham Group, perched high on the hills of Seoul, glittered with wealth and beauty, but she was only a shadow within its marble halls. An African young woman who had come to South Korea with dreams far smaller than the world around her. Her job was simple: clean, serve, disappear. While the other maids gossiped in corners and the male workers flirted with the glamorous secretaries, Easter worked in silence. Her dark skin often drew whispers, her accent quiet mockery. She never fought back. She only smiled faintly and focused on her duties. But what no one knew was that Disham Kong, the mysterious Korean billionaire and heir to the empire, noticed everything. He noticed how Easter would pause near the garden and whisper to the flowers as if they could understand her. He saw her slip food to the stray kitten that lived under the back steps. He saw how she stayed after hours to polish the marble floors until they shone like moonlight, even though no one ever thanked her. Disham wasn't a man easily moved by beauty. Women from all over Seoul, socialites, models, actresses, sought his attention. They dressed in luxury, laughed with practiced charm, and surrounded him at business galas. Yet he always felt cold among them, until one morning, Easter had accidentally entered his private study while dusting. She froze when she saw him, tall and composed behind his desk, dressed in a crisp white shirt that seemed to glow against the dark wood around him. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't know you were here," she stammered, bowing quickly. Disham looked up from his laptop, his deep eyes meeting hers. For a long, silent moment, something unfamiliar stirred inside him. There was honesty in her eyes, the kind that wealth couldn't buy. "It's all right," he said softly. "What's your name?" "Easter, sir." He nodded once. "You may continue." From that day, everything changed. He began to notice her more intentionally. The gentle rhythm of her steps, the way sunlight caught on her smooth skin, the quiet melody she hummed when she thought no one was listening. Soon, he found himself searching for her presence. In the corridors, the gardens, even the dining room, the other workers started to whisper. Why does the boss always ask for her to serve his tea? Did she use some kind of charm? Impossible. She's just a maid. But Easter remained the same. Humble, calm, and distant. She had no idea her boss was drawn to her in ways he couldn't understand. One late evening, Disham found her sitting by the back steps after the rain, her uniform damp, a soft tear rolling down her cheek. He approached quietly. "Why are you crying?" She gasped and quickly stood. I'm sorry, sir. It's nothing. Nothing doesn't make someone cry," he said gently. She hesitated, then whispered, "I just miss home sometimes. Back in Africa, my mother and I would dance when it rained. Here, I just clean up the puddles." She tried to laugh, but it broke midway. Disham's chest tightened. He removed his jacket and draped it around her shoulders. "Then dance," he said quietly. Her eyes widened. He stepped back and nodded toward the drizzle still falling. "Dance, Easter." At first, she shook her head, shy, unsure. But as the wind carried the scent of wet earth, she let herself twirl softly, her bare feet moving on the wet stone. Her laughter, real, light, and pure, echoed through the quiet night. And Disham, the man who had never smiled for love, found himself watching her like she was something sacred. From that night, he couldn't resist anymore. He began calling her to his office for small talks, under the excuse of new assignments. But instead, they would talk about her home, her dreams, and the stars. Sometimes he'd ask her to teach him words in her language. Other times, he'd make her tea just to watch her smile. Then one evening, during a business gala, Disham shocked everyone. When reporters asked him about his rumored relationship with the actress seated beside him, he smiled faintly and said, "The only woman I admire doesn't wear diamonds. She cleans them." The room fell silent. And somewhere in the mansion, Easter, who was watching the event live on TV, dropped the glass she was polishing. The next morning, every worker stared as Disham walked into the servants' quarters, something he had never done. He stopped right in front of her, ignoring the murmurs. "Easter," he said, voice firm yet tender, "come with me." He led her to the garden, where cherry blossoms were beginning to bloom. The air was soft, scented with spring. "Do you know why I rejected every woman they tried to set me up with?" he asked. She shook her head, too nervous to speak. "Because none of them made me feel human," he said. "But when I see you, I remember what kindness looks like, what peace feels like." Her lips parted in disbelief. "Sir, I'm just—" He stepped closer, gently lifting her chin. "You're everything, Easter." Her heart raced wildly as he looked into her eyes. Not as a maid, not as an employee, but as a woman. And there, beneath the soft pink petals, Disham brushed his fingers against her cheek and whispered, "You were never invisible to me." Easter felt tears rise again. But this time, they were made of joy. From that day, the mansion changed. The workers who once mocked her now watched in awe as Disham often walked beside her, laughed with her, and protected her. He made no effort to hide his feelings anymore. And though they hadn't spoken of love out loud, it was there, in every look, every gentle touch, every heartbeat they shared in silence. Their story had just begun. After that unforgettable moment beneath the cherry blossoms, Easter's world changed. Yet she tried to keep her feet on the ground. She still woke up before dawn to clean, still tied her apron, bowed respectfully when Disham entered the room. But something had shifted. Every time their eyes met, a secret warmth passed between them, invisible to everyone else, but powerful enough to make her heart race. Disham, the man the world called cold and untouchable, had begun to smile more often. His assistants noticed how he spent less time in board meetings and more time wandering through the gardens where Easter worked. His mother, the elegant Madame Kong, began to wonder why her son's suits always carried the faint scent of soap and roses, the scent of the servants' quarters. But Disham didn't care what anyone thought. Each evening, when the mansion grew quiet, he would send a message through one of his trusted guards. "Tell Easter to come to the rooftop garden." That hidden garden, lush with orchids and soft lights, became their secret world. There, Easter and Disham talked for hours. Sometimes they shared stories from their opposite worlds. He told her about growing up in a palace of silence, burdened by wealth and expectation. She told him about running barefoot through the red soil of her African village, chasing sunsets with her little brothers. She had laughter that healed his tired soul. He had eyes that saw her worth when no one else did. One night, as the moon painted her skin silver, Disham finally reached for her hand. "Easter," he said softly, "do you ever wish you could go back home?" She hesitated. "Sometimes. But then, I wouldn't have met you." He smiled faintly, his thumb brushing her knuckles. "You have no idea what that means to me." Her heart fluttered. "You're my boss, sir. I shouldn't." He gently placed a finger on her lips. "Don't call me sir when it's just us." "Then what should I call you?" she whispered. "Disham," he breathed. "Only you can say it like that." The world outside faded. He leaned closer, his breath warm against her cheek. For a second, she thought he would kiss her. But he stopped just short, his gaze full of restraint and fire all at once. "Not yet," he murmured. "I want you to know it's real first." From that night on, their love grew quietly, like the roses that bloomed in secret. When the other servants mocked her, Easter no longer flinched. She knew the truth, that behind closed doors, the billionaire they worshipped would hold her hand under the moonlight and listen to her heartbeat as if it were music. But love, especially love that defied class, was never simple. One afternoon, Disham's mother discovered them in the garden. Easter was pruning flowers when Madame Kong appeared, her voice sharp as ice. "So you're the reason my son refuses every woman I bring him?" Easter froze. "Madam, I—" Silence. The older woman stepped closer, eyes filled with contempt. "You think scrubbing floors and wearing a uniform gives you the right to touch him?" Easter's lips trembled, but she didn't defend herself. She bowed deeply. "I never planned this, ma'am. I only love him quietly." Madame Kong scoffed. "Love? You mean ambition." At that moment, Disham's voice cut through the air like thunder. "Enough, mother." They both turned. He had been standing there all along, eyes blazing with protectiveness. "Don't talk to her like that." His mother's face paled. "Disham, you can't be serious. She's the woman I care about," he interrupted, stepping beside Easter and gently taking her hand. "And I won't let anyone humiliate her again." Easter's heart pounded wildly. His grip was firm, his words certain. For the first time, he didn't hide it. When Madame Kong stormed away in disbelief, Disham turned to Easter. "I told myself I'd keep this between us, but I can't anymore. I don't care what the world thinks." Tears welled in her eyes. "You're risking everything." He smiled softly. "You're worth everything." From that day, the mansion changed again, this time in ways no one could ignore. Disham began having breakfast in the servant's kitchen just to sit across from her. He'd take her out late at night in his car, both of them hidden behind tinted glass, driving through Seoul's glowing streets like two souls escaping the world. He'd hold her hand at stoplights, whispering in her ear, "I used to think love was a distraction. Now I think it's the only thing that ever made sense." And Easter would smile, resting her head on his shoulder, feeling like she finally belonged somewhere. Not as a maid, but as a woman loved beyond measure. Still, they both knew the storm wasn't over. The media would soon find out, the company would question him, and society would never easily accept a billionaire falling for his African maid. But Disham didn't care. Every time he looked into her eyes, he saw a future worth fighting for. Their love had started in silence, grown in secret, and now it was ready to face the world. The whispers began like the wind, soft, scattered, harmless. But in the world of the powerful, whispers quickly grow into storms. By the time the tabloids caught their first glimpse of Easter, the African maid often seen leaving the billionaire's private car at night, Seoul's gossip columns exploded. Billionaire Disham Kong spotted with mystery woman. Not from high society. Disham's secret lover? Sources claim she works in his mansion. Kong heir in love with his maid. Scandal or true love? When the news broke, the mansion turned into a volcano of judgment. The servants who once ignored Easter now stared at her with open resentment. Some whispered insults. Others avoided her entirely. Disham, however, stood firm. The very morning after the headlines appeared, he arrived at the company headquarters with Easter beside him. Dressed simply in a long white dress, her natural beauty radiating quiet confidence. As they walked into the building, camera flashes burst like lightning. Disham reached for her hand. Not hiding it, not denying it. Reporters shouted questions. Is she really your maid? Are you in love with her? Is she moving into your mansion permanently? Disham stopped, turned toward the crowd, and in a calm but powerful voice said, Yes, she worked for me. And yes, I'm in love with her. I don't choose a woman for her title. I choose her for her heart. Easter felt tears prick her eyes as the world seemed to freeze. That one declaration shook everything. His company's board members demanded explanations. His mother locked herself away in humiliation. His friends accused him of losing control. But none of it mattered because every night, when he came home, Easter's presence calmed him. He'd find her in the garden, watering plants or feeding the kitten she still cared for. He'd approach quietly and wrap his arms around her waist from behind. Are you scared? He'd whisper against her ear. Sometimes, she'd admit. They all look at me like I stole something. He'd kiss her hair and say softly, You didn't steal anything. You're the one who taught me what love is. But the world wasn't done testing them. One evening, Disham was invited to an elite business banquet, an event attended by the richest families in Korea. Rumor had it that Madame Kong herself planned to attend for the first time in months. Disham knew what it meant. She wanted to make a statement. He went anyway, but not alone. Easter, though nervous, stood by his side in a flowing black gown he had personally chosen. He had told her, Walk beside me, not behind me. Let them see the woman I love. As they entered the ballroom, conversations died. Every eye turned to them. The polished elites whispered behind crystal glasses, but Disham never released her hand. Madame Kong approached slowly, her expression unreadable. The crowd went silent, waiting for confrontation. Instead, she looked at Easter from head to toe and said coldly, "You've caused chaos, young woman." Easter bowed deeply. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I never meant to." Disham interrupted, voice firm. "She caused nothing. I did." Madame Kang's eyes softened slightly, the faintest crack in her icy armor. "You really love her, don't you?" He nodded without hesitation. "With everything I am." The old woman exhaled, turning to Easter. "Then don't break what you didn't ask for. My son is not an easy man to love." Easter's voice trembled, but her heart was strong. "I won't, ma'am. I never wanted his world, only his heart." Madame Kang studied her, then finally stepped aside, allowing them to pass. The moment spread across every news outlet. Disham Kang, the billionaire heir, choosing love over image. That night, as they returned home, Easter stood on the balcony overlooking Seoul's glittering skyline. "You risked your name, your company, your family, all for me. Why?" she whispered. He turned her gently toward him, his eyes deep and full of emotion. "Because," he said, brushing his thumb across her cheek, "I spent years surrounded by beauty that meant nothing. Then you came, quiet, humble, shining without trying. You became my peace, Easter. I'd rather lose the world than lose you." Tears streamed down her cheeks. He cupped her face and leaned in slowly. This time, there was no hesitation, no fear, no distance. His lips found hers in a soft, lingering kiss that felt like the world finally exhaled. It wasn't rushed, it wasn't perfect. It was real. The billionaire and the maid, standing in the quiet night, no longer hiding. Their love had survived silence, ridicule, and fear, and now it was free. From that night forward, Easter no longer hid her smile. She walked beside Disham in public, visited his office, sat beside him at charity events. The same reporters who mocked her now called her the woman who changed the Kang Empire. And in the privacy of their world, he still called her his peace, his light, his forever. But even as love settled between them, a new chapter awaited. One that would test their bond in ways deeper than gossip or pride. The weeks that followed their public reveal felt like living between heaven and fire. For Easter, love had blossomed into something beautiful, yet surrounded by thorns. Some newspapers praised her humility and strength, calling her the Cinderella of Seoul. Others dragged her name through the mud, painting her as an opportunist who had bewitched a billionaire. But Disham refused to let the noise touch her. He had weathered business wars and family feuds before, but none of them prepared him for the war of hearts that came with loving someone the world didn't think he should. Still, every night, when he came home and found Easter waiting with that calm smile and gentle eyes, all the chaos outside faded. Their love became his anchor. One evening, as the rain pattered softly against the windows, Disham found Easter in the kitchen, wearing a simple apron, humming quietly as she cooked. The scent of garlic and stew filled the air. "You still cook?" he asked with a teasing smile, leaning against the doorframe. "You have chefs now, you know?" She laughed, turning to face him. "Old habits. Besides, they cook for taste. I cook for heart." He walked closer, sliding his arms around her waist from behind. "That's exactly why I fell for you." Easter blushed, her voice low. "Do you ever regret it? Choosing me over everything else?" He turned her gently to face him, looking deep into her eyes. "Never. You didn't take me from anything, Easter. You gave me something I never had, peace." Then, in a moment of quiet sincerity, he took her hand and placed it over his heart. "Every time I feel the world is against us, I remember this. You're here, steady, warm, real. And that's all I need." Her eyes softened with tears, and she leaned against his chest, listening to the rhythm of his heartbeat. Despite the intimacy of their love, pressure grew. The board members of Kang Group began to threaten Disham with resignation. Investors worried that his personal life would ruin the company's public image. His mother, though she had accepted Easter, still struggled with the idea of her son marrying below his social class. And yet Disham didn't bend. At a major shareholders' meeting, an older executive stood and said bluntly, "Sir, with all due respect, your relationship with this woman has brought disgrace. The company needs stability, not scandal." Disham rose slowly from his seat, his expression unreadable. "You're right about one thing," he said. "The company does need stability, which is why it needs a leader who knows the value of loyalty and truth. Easter taught me both." A murmur rippled through the room. He continued, voice strong and unwavering. "She's not a stain on my reputation. She's the reason I remembered what humanity looks like. If that costs me shareholders, so be it. But I will never apologize for love." The room fell silent. And just like that, the story began to change. Investors who once criticized him began to respect him. The public saw not scandal but sincerity. His leadership became even stronger, driven by heart rather than pride. And through it all, Easter stood by him quietly, never asking for recognition, never demanding attention. She was simply there, his calm in every storm. As winter came, their bond deepened beyond words. They traveled together to Jeju Island, to Busan, and once to Africa. When they arrived in her home village, Easter watched as Disham knelt down to greet her mother with a respectful bow, saying, "Thank you for raising a woman who changed my life." Her mother, overwhelmed, took his hands and said with tears, "Take care of her. She's always given love freely. Make sure she never gives it alone." That night, as they walked under the vast African sky, Easter whispered, "I never thought the man who lived in marble walls would walk barefoot on my soil." Disham smiled softly, slipping his fingers through hers. "For you, I'd walk anywhere." She looked up at him. The man who had once been untouchable, now so human, so present, and realized just how far their hearts had come. Back in Seoul, their love grew into a rhythm. Quiet breakfasts together, stolen glances in board meetings, late-night drives through the city. He began involving her in his charity projects, saying, "You understand people better than I ever could." She inspired him to build a foundation that helped women from underprivileged backgrounds find education and work, naming it the Easter Hope Foundation. Every camera that once sought to mock them now captured something else: unity, strength, compassion. Easter had gone from the forgotten maid in the mansion to the heart behind its walls, the woman who transformed a billionaire into a man of love. Still, their journey wasn't done, because beneath the quiet happiness, something new was growing. A gentle, secret heartbeat that neither of them had expected. It began softly, almost unnoticed. Easter started feeling lightheaded in the mornings, her appetite changed, and sleep seemed to come and go like waves. She thought it was fatigue from traveling and stress. After all, her life had transformed from humble routines to the breathtaking pace of being beside a global tycoon. But one quiet dawn, as she stood in front of the mirror, a hand instinctively moved to her stomach. A whisper escaped her lips, half shock, half wonder. No, it can't be. For days she kept it to herself. She wanted to be sure, wanted to feel it was real before saying a word. She visited a private clinic under another name, trembling as the doctor smiled and said gently, "Congratulations, Mississippi. You're about 6 weeks pregnant." Her world went still. Tears welled up as she pressed her hand to her chest. In that instant, she saw everything. The lonely maid who once scrubbed marble floors, now carrying the child of the man who had given her love, dignity, and a future she never imagined. That night, she waited for Disham in the rooftop garden, the same place their love had first bloomed in secret. When he arrived, still in his suit, looking weary from a day of meetings, she smiled faintly. "You look tired," she said softly. He exhaled, loosening his tie. "It's been chaos, but seeing you always makes it worth it." He stepped closer to kiss her forehead, but she caught his hand instead, her fingers trembling. "Disham," she whispered, "there's something I need to tell you." Tears shining in her eyes, she looked up and said, "I'm pregnant." He frowned slightly, sensing her seriousness. "What is it, my love?" She took a breath, her heart racing. "I went to the doctor today." Then, with tears shining in her eyes, she looked up and said, I'm pregnant. For a long heartbeat, he said nothing. The night breeze carried the scent of roses, and the city lights glittered below them, witnesses to their moment. Then, slowly, a smile broke across his face. Not just joy, but awe. He reached out, resting his palm over her stomach as if afraid to break the magic. Are you sure? She nodded, laughing through her tears. I'm sure. And then, something inside him melted. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her tight against his chest. His voice was low, full of emotion. You've given me everything, Easter. Everything I didn't even know I needed. Her tears soaked into his shirt as he whispered again. Thank you for this gift, for trusting me with your heart. And now our child. From that day, Disham changed even more. He canceled late meetings, learned to cook porridge for her cravings, and refused to let her climb stairs without his hand steadying her. The once stoic billionaire now fussed over vitamins, late-night snacks, and baby names. Sometimes Easter would tease him. You're the one acting pregnant, she'd laugh. And he'd grin and say, if I could carry the baby for you, I would. Their love deepened into something tender, protective, and pure. Every evening, he'd rest his head on her lap, speaking softly to her belly. Little one, he'd murmur. Your mom is the strongest woman I've ever known. You're lucky to grow under her heart. Easter would run her fingers through his hair, her smile full of love. He'll grow up to be just like you, gentle but strong. Or like you, he'd whisper back, with light in every step. As her belly grew, even Madame Kong softened completely. She began visiting often, bringing soups and traditional remedies. One afternoon, she told Easter quietly, at first, I was afraid you would take my son away from his world, but now I see, you gave him a world worth living in. Easter reached for her hand, grateful tears filling her eyes. When the news of her pregnancy reached the public, instead of scandal, it sparked warmth. The tabloids that once mocked her now wrote of the love that redefined power. People saw in them something rare, a reminder that love could break walls, cross oceans, and heal hearts. And then came the day, after hours of labor, with Disham holding her hand and whispering encouragement through every tear and every breath. A cry filled the hospital room. Strong, beautiful, full of life. The doctor smiled. It's a boy. Easter sobbed in relief, clutching the tiny bundle placed on her chest. Disham's face was wet with tears as he leaned down, kissing her forehead again and again. He's perfect, she whispered. He looks like you, Disham said softly, brushing his thumb across the baby's tiny cheek. No, she smiled faintly. He looks like love. They named him Minjun Cairo Kong, a blend of two worlds, Korean and African, bound by love that defied all odds. That night, as Easter lay resting, Disham stood by the window, holding their son. The city glowed beneath them, endless lights flickering like stars. He whispered to the sleeping child, you'll grow up knowing that love doesn't care where you come from, what language you speak, or what color your skin is. You're proof that two hearts can change everything. Then he turned to Easter, who was watching with soft, sleepy eyes. Rest, my love, he said. You've given me a reason to live, to fight, to dream. And now those same flowers filled the gardens she designed herself. A place she named the Garden of Beginnings, where she often played with their little boy, Minjun Cairo Kong. Minjun had his father's calm eyes and his mother's golden warmth. From the time he could walk, he followed Easter everywhere, tugging her skirts, chasing butterflies, and asking endless questions about the world. One afternoon, as she sat beneath the cherry blossom tree that had once witnessed her first moments of love with Disham, Minjun climbed into her lap. Mommy, he said softly, why does Daddy always call you my miracle? Easter smiled, brushing his soft hair aside. Because once upon a time, Mommy was just a helper in Daddy's house. Nobody saw me, nobody cared. But Daddy looked at me and saw love instead. Minjun tilted his head, eyes wide with innocence. So he chose you? Yes, she whispered, tears shining. He chose me, and I chose him back. Behind them, Disham stood silently, listening, his heart swelling with pride. He walked closer, kneeling beside them. "And that's why you're here," he said, kissing Minjun's forehead. "You're proof that love doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be real." As years passed, Disham and Easter became more than a couple. They became a story the world admired. The Easter Hope Foundation expanded across continents, funding schools and hospitals for underprivileged children in both Africa and South Korea. Easter often traveled with her team, visiting remote villages, cradling babies, and speaking to young girls about courage and self-worth. Disham, though still the powerful CEO of Kong Group, began to focus more on humanitarian projects. He told investors during a global summit, "Our wealth means nothing if it doesn't heal the world that built it." The room erupted in applause, not just for his success, but for the compassion he had learned from the woman who once swept his floors. Their love matured into something peaceful, sacred. Not loud, not public, but deeply rooted. They still had their rituals. Morning ritual. Disham made her coffee just the way she liked, with a touch of cinnamon, and kissed her forehead before work. Evening ritual. They took late-night walks through their garden, holding hands, reminiscing about where it all began. Weekend ritual. Sundays were for family, no meetings, no interviews, no wealth. Just laughter, cooking, dancing barefoot in the kitchen, and stories under warm blankets. Sometimes, Disham would pause mid-conversation, watching her with quiet awe. "You changed me, Easter," he'd say, and she'd smile. "No, Disham, love changed both of us." When Minjun turned 5, they took him to Africa, to the same village where Easter was born. The people welcomed them with song and drums, women dancing in circles as Easter wept tears of gratitude. Disham knelt in the red soil, placing his hand on his heart. "This is where your mother's strength comes from," he told Minjun. "This land raised the woman who raised us both." The little boy looked around, eyes wide with wonder. "Then this is home too," he whispered. Easter kissed his cheek, her heart full. "Yes, my love. No matter where we go, we carry home inside us." Years later, when the media released a documentary titled Disham and Easter, A Love Beyond Borders, it broke records across Asia and Africa. Their story, once mocked, became a symbol of hope. They stood on stage during the film's premiere, hand in hand, as the audience rose in applause. Easter spoke softly into the microphone. "Love doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't see color, status, or past. It simply finds the heart that beats for it, and that's where it stays." Disham's eyes shimmered with pride. He pulled her close and whispered for only her to hear, "You're still the only woman who ever made my world feel real." Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment. Also like, share, and subscribe to my channel and click on the notification icon so that you will get notified whenever a new story is